Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Vivek Bharata. Imagine building robust, scalable APIs with ease. That's what NestJS can do for you. In this crash course, we will cover core concepts essential for mastering NestJS. We'll start with basic commands of NestJS CLI, decorator pattern, three-layer architecture, dependency injection, creating basic routes with dummy responses, and then mapping to a proper service level data, introduction to Swagger for API documentation, validation pipes and gods. Before we jump in, I would like to thank everyone who participated in our community poll. By the time of this recording, NestJS had received the most votes. Following closely were topics like building RESTful APIs with Node.js and Express, then authentication and authorization in microservices with NestJS, and then last one for the Golang for JS developers. Don't worry, we'll be covering the other topics in the next set of videos. Alright, let's start by installing NestJS at the global level. And the command would be npm install -g @nestjs/cli. Okay, once it's installed, you can just look at the version. Current version is 10.4.8. We can create a NestJS project with a single command, nest new. Let's name it nest-cc as crash course. Okay, and it is asking whether to which package manager we should use. Let's just go with npm. This command will create a folder nest-cc, that is our project name what we have given over here, and also all the other files, and currently it's installing all packages. Okay, it's completed, so we can just cd into nest-cc. Then let's open in Visual Studio Code. Let me just increase the font size. I think this is clear. Okay, before diving deep into the folder structures and all, we'll start with package.json file. Okay, so here if you can see, this is the name of our project, and these are all the number of scripts which are automatically generated. And during the development, of course, we're going to use this command because this is with a watch flag, so whenever you do any changes, the server will restart automatically. Okay, and there are other set of commands for the testing. And if you can look at the dependencies, we have only two core NestJS packages. Adding to that, if you can see here, there is a third package, that is Platform Express, which is kind of self-explanatory, right? NestJS by default will use Express.js framework internally, and it also supports Fastify. And out of the box, it is TypeScript based. Okay, so let's just start the server as is. That would be npm start. Okay, starting nest application successfully started over here. Okay, now let's just open, and by default the port is 3000, so localhost 3000. Hello world. So with one single command, the whole project structure has been defined. Now let's start with source folder. As you can see, there are other set of files which are related to the TypeScript, Prettier, and also ESLint, and there is a separate dedicated test folder as well. Let's just dive into the source folder, and inside there are many files: app controller, app module, app service.ts. Let's start with main.ts because this is the actual entry point for the whole NestJS based applications. And on high level, if you can see, there is a function called bootstrap, and that is being called immediately at line number 8. So on line 5, we have nest factory create, and we are passing app module. And this app module is our own app module file, which is present inside the source folder. Okay, so before jumping into the app module, let's just go back to main.ts and imagine this is one module. Okay, that is app module, and we got an app instance over here, and we start listening at port 3000 if we don't have any env set for port. Okay, clear? So that's it. This line would basically start the server. So this is just a very basic entry point, and the root module would be app module. Okay, and this app module, if you see, this is just simple empty class definition. However, if you can clearly see, there is a decorator pattern being used. So in simple terms, a decorator is a structural design pattern that lets you attach new behavior to the objects. I have covered a decorator pattern a bit in detail in a YouTube short. You can go through that. So in this case, as this is an app module, which is a very basic class, right? Which is not being extended with any other base class also. But we have defined a decorator over here that is a module, and that is being imported from the NestJS common. You can hover in the VS Code and it will show you decorator. So this module is a decorator that marks a class as a module. Modules are used by NestJS to organize the application structures into scopes and there is other things as well. So on high level, in this case, we have three fields as an object which is being passed as a first argument into this module decorator. First is imports, like if this module needs any other external modules that needs to be imported into this app module. And there is a controllers which is defined like, okay, in this app module we have one app controller, and the providers one app service is being defined as a provider. That's it. Okay. Now, so app module, so each domain level entities can be treated as a modules. Okay, I'll just cover that later, but for now you can consider in that way. So in controllers, if you see, we have defined as app controller. So let's just open this one, that is just over here, app controller. And here also, if you can see, we have a class defined app controller, and we have the decorator as controller. So this class will be treated as a controller in SJS. Okay, and there is a constructor, and this pattern, if you can see, if you can correlate, this is dependency injection. We are injecting a dependency into a constructor for this app controller. That's it. And there's a method inside this app controller, that is get hello. And again, for this function get hello, this is the return type of string, and we have a decorator as @get. And inside this controller function of get hello, we are using app service get hello method. And if you just open this one, so this app service is again a simple class, and it is decorated by an injectable decorator. Meaning, so in any class which is decorated with this injectable can be passed as a dependency for any other classes. Okay, and this get hello method is just simply returning hello world. So this is how the current endpoint, that is at the root level, hello world, is being derived. Okay, if you just change this to double exclamation marks, and let's start this with npm run start dev. Okay, and if you just refresh this one, we got double exclamation marks. That's it. I hope this is clear. So I'll just reiterate. At the root level main.ts, we are using app module. So at any point of time in the whole NestJS server, there has to be only one root module, and in our case, that is app module. And inside that, it can have multiple modules like users module, post, any other domain level modules which can be defined, and those acts as a children. And the root level and the root module will always be one module, and in this case, we can term that as app module. That's it. I also created one video on fundamentals of Nest.js in a separate video. You can check that as well. Also, if you can identify the pattern over here, we have this three-layer architecture. So first layer is controller. It contains API routes to the application. The only job of a controller is to return a response from the server. It deals with the request from the client and return the response from the server. That's it. Next one is service layer. It handles the business logic of the application. And the service layer should be defined in a way that it should not only be compatible with the controllers, and but also, like, let's say your application can also run as a CLI service, or maybe as a cron service, or any type of microservice. And the next layer is data access layer, which is also termed as repository layer in context of Nest.js. So the only responsibility of data access layer is to fetch or update or do all the IOPS at the database level. That's it. And in most of the cases, this data access layer also should not deal with any business logic. The only layer which will be responsible for the business logic should be service layer. That's it. I hope this is clear. Now let's jump back to the code. So in the app.controller, we have this two decorators, @controller and @get. And if you have observed, and currently this app controller is being served at the root level. We can just change that by defining a path. Let's say this should be like app1 as an extra layer. The server has started. Now if we just refresh over here, we get 404 because currently this app controller is being served at path app1. So if you just do /app1, then we get this hello world. And also this is at the controller level as a first base path. Now we can also do this thing as hello. Now if you can guess, if you refresh here, you will get again 404, and you need to pass hello over here, and you'll get hello world. Okay, so in this decorator you can set the path also. Let's just revert this one. Okay, now let's introduce another entity, that is users. Let's open another terminal. Let's start by creating a users controller, and we can generate the code with CLI nest generate controller users. Okay, as you can see, there are two create operations, users.controller.spec file, users.controller.ts file, and there is an updated app.module. So if I just open over here, we have a folder separate as users controller. Okay, again, if you see, it's as simple as just defining a class and decorating that as a controller decorator with users path. Okay, and there is an updated app.module. If you see here inside app.module, this users controller is defined as controllers. So whenever this nest.js application will start, based on the definition of the controller, this users controller also will be part of the current running application. Now let's add one basic endpoint that would be like, let's say, find all. That's it. Okay, for now let's just return as string. I know it doesn't make sense, but like all users, let's call this. Okay, and this is just a single function, so we'll just decorate this with a get decorator. And also, instead of controllers, as part of the best practices, let's just add slash API, like API slash users, and this can be empty. Okay, now let's just go back to the browser and let's just add API slash users. That's it. We got all users. Let's start using Postman also, so it would be a bit easy for us. Let's just add slash API slash users, and I just remove this one and let's just go. Okay, we got this all users as a response. Clear? Can now let's jump back to the code. Let's add some more methods like find, maybe like find one. Just close this sidebar. So for the find one, if you can guess, we need to pass the ID of a user, right? So how we can define that as a route parameter as at the rate param, and we can just pass as ID. Okay, and let's name this as user ID. That's it. So we can also pass something like user ID, get user ID for this user ID. Okay, and again, if you can see here, this is a param decorator with ID. So when this function is being defined, so for this find one function, we are expecting a parameter, and that would be, and for in this context of this function, we are naming that as user ID. That's it. Okay, and also if you see here, there are two get methods with the same endpoint, which doesn't work. If you can guess, it will serve only the first occurrence, first matching function. It will basically skip this one. I'll just show you that also. We just click send, we are getting all users. Okay, now for in our case, we should define as ID colon ID. So NestJS will understand that, okay, there is another endpoint with the same get request with a get HTTP verb, and the placeholder keyword is ID. That's it. Now if you just add 55 over here, we get user 55. Okay, I think we can just minimize this one. Let's add some more functions like find one. Let's maybe update one, and this should be put method. Okay, and if you can see, I'm just hitting enter during the suggestion, and these are automatically imported from the nest.js common package. Okay, then this to update user, and also let's just write for delete as well. Delete one, delete user. Okay, let me just quickly switch to delete, and let's just call. Okay, delete user ID. That's it. So the pattern, if you can understand, so the pattern, if you can see, most of the stuff is being defined with the help of decorators and the parameter that's being passed inside the decorator. That's it. Now let's just cover the create user as well. So the specific method would be post, and we can remove this parameter. Okay, and just rename this as create user. Now we'll be introducing a concept called DTO, data transfer objects, that acts as a data type at the network level. Now for this create method, we need a DTO with the user fields. So we can do by creating a DTO folder inside, and let's just create a file as create user dto.ts. And if you can guess, we'll just define as a class create user DTO. And first field can be name string, this as email, and for now as an example to use different data type, let's name this as age. Okay, three fields, that's it. Okay, now inside the user controller, what you can define as, if you can guess, it's a decorator again. So in the create method, you will be defining it as body decorate. Okay, and let's name this as create user, and the type is create user DTO. So in the VS Code, it will auto suggest, and you can just hit enter, and that will be automatically imported in the user controller. All right. So create user ID. So create user. Uh, let's just print name for now. Okay, create user dot name. That's it. So we're just returning the name for now. Okay. Now let's just jump back to the postman. Let's duplicate this. Change this to post. Remove this endpoint, and let's just pass the object over here. Name as Vivek, and email as vivek@nestcc.com. All right. So let's just send create user. We are just returning it as Vivek. Status code as 201 created. Clear? Okay. Till this point, we created a controller, users controller, and we defined all the basic endpoints. Now let's just introduce service. If you can guess, it will be similar command. Instead of controller, we're gonna pass service. That's it. Let's generate service users, and inside the users folder you can see there is two files created and also updated the app module, because we're gonna pass the user service in the providers. That's it. Okay, so now user service.ts file. Here again, if you see, it's a class, simple class, right? And we are passing the decorator as injectable. That's it. Instead of using the database, as I said, we are not covering the data access layer. So let's just use in memory, and we'll just save in the user service class instance itself. Okay. Let's start by defining the users array. Private read-only users. Okay. And let's add two objects for now. So let's define the type for this user object as well. So we can create one folder as entities. This can be extended when we cover database integration in a different video. But for now, inside the entities folder, we can just create one file, that is user.entity.ts. So this entity file, this user.entity.ts file will be a mapper file for the database interactions. So for now, it will be a simple class. You export class as user. Export class as user. That's it. Let's define four properties for now. One is ID string, and string, email, and this will be age. And let's make this age as optional. And also for the DTO, also let's make this as optional. Okay, let's just define this as user type. ID, let's name this as ABC01, and name Wolf, email wolf@nestcc.com for now. Okay, and also let's just define age as well, 23. Let's copy paste this object, abc02. Let's name this also as abc01, and as fish, and maybe 25 age. Okay, so let's just use as in memory, and we have this users is declared, and we have this users now. Now let's just close the loop where users controller will use user service to serve all endpoints. So let's start with find all. So instead of returning the string, let's just change this to user array. Okay, and also we need to use a function from the user service, so we'll get all the user objects, right? So let's just define the function first over here, like maybe as find all. Okay, and here also we can just maintain the return type as you we can use the return type as user array, and let's just return this dot users, simple. Okay, and there is an error over here, return the user is missing the following properties from type user. I think there is a small typo. Oh yeah, this is an user array type. Oops. Okay, all right. So now the server as it's running in the background is in the watch mode. So let's close the loop, users controller, and here it is returning. Here the server is throwing an error because return type is an array. So now let's close the loop. In order to use user service inside the user controller, we'll be using dependency injection. So inside the constructor, if you can see here in the app controller, it is injecting app service, right? So we'll be following the same pattern. Private read only user service of type user service of type user service. That's it. So now in the find all function, now let's just use the user service function. This dot user service dot find all. That's it. If you observe, we are not explicitly defining a user service as a property for this user's controller. So this is a shortcut for it, which acts as defining the user service as a property for the user's controller and also injects that user service. Okay. So now we closed find all function loop. Let's jump back to the postman and let's just call get users. If we call trigger, so we got two objects, the one what we just defined. Okay, with status code as 200. Clear? So now we close the loop from users controller and user service. Let's cover some more endpoints like find one and create. So for the find one, we can just call as find one. Okay, and we can pass the argument user ID, and the return type would be user. Okay, and we can use JavaScript's array find this dot users dot find user of user matching with ID. That's it. So now let's just call this inside this controller, this dot user service dot find one, and let's just pass the user ID. That's it. And the return type also, let's fix this. That's it. So now let's just call get again. So we got this one. Let's copy this ABC ID and let's pass this as ID. Okay, so we encountered an error. We can just, oh, this is a post object, sorry. So let's just duplicate this again and let's just pass the ID over here. Okay, get request sent. Okay, there's a typo. I thought of adding fish. Somehow it just got as fish. So let's go to user service. So over here, fish. Okay. All right. So this is clear, right? So if we can just change this to ABC01, we'll be getting wolf. That's it. Now let's just close the loop for the post as well. So inside the users.service, let's make it simple. So create, and this would be user object of create user dto, if you can remember, and let's just return that one. So for now, let's create new user and ID Let's call date.now. All right. So we'll just push this into the array. This dot users dot push new user, and we'll just return new user. Okay. Now inside the user dot controller, let's just close that loop by calling user service create user and fix the return back. That's it. Okay. Now let's show the mistake earlier. So I'm passing name and email. Okay. Let's call. Okay, now the user object has been created, 201. Now let's just call the get users. Now it should be returned three objects, right? ABC02 and the Vivek also. And if you can see, there is an ID and we're using date.now. So that's how the ID got constructed. Okay. Now we can again pass Vivek1, send, and here the return response would be of 4 length. Vivek and Vivek1. Okay. And if you can see here, we're slowly growing the users folder overall. And also it's a very good practice to define this users folder as a users module and define the controllers and services there. And let's just import that users module over in the root app.module. That's it. So how we gonna do it? Let's just switch to and the terminal and let's just call nestg. So instead of generate, we can just pass as g also. So nestg module users. So it will create users module and app.module is updated by importing that users module as you can see over here. Okay. And now inside the users module over here and from the app module, let's just copy, paste, else you can just directly define. So over here, imports, or now it's empty, controllers, we have users controller, right? And for the providers, we have user service. That's it. Okay. And inside app.module, we really don't need to declare users controller at this level because we are importing the whole users module. So whatever defined inside the users module, those will be automatically declared at the NestJS level. So we can actually remove these import statements also. And let's just see if there are any errors and looks cool. So let's just call the request again. As you can see, as the data is being stored at the in memory, as every time the server restarts, the users array will be reset. And now if you call get users, you'll get only two objects again, wolf and fish. Okay, let's just call this post again and let's just call get again so that to make sure everything is working clear. Okay, so till this point I'll just reiterate at the high level. We created a users folder by starting with users controller. We started with a dummy string return responses and later we introduced service. And in this user service, as part of the crash course, we're not actually using repositories layer where we can attach it to the database like Postgres or MongoDB. So we just defined an in-memory users array and we have only two objects for now. And we defined three functions, find all, find one, and create. And we are just emulating the database operations at this level. Usually, the service function should have the core business logic. Okay. And then as the whole users folder has been grown properly and also we defined necessary files like entities, user entity, and also the DTO, create user DTO. Okay. And at this level, as it's growing the whole users folder, and it's always best practice to define it as a users module and declare controllers over here. And in the app.module, we're just importing users module, and inside all the controllers and services will be automatically declared at the as controllers or services in the whole NestJS application level. I hope till this point it is clear. Now I'll be introducing Swagger documentation. So for that, first we need to install Swagger dependencies. So let's just switch back to the other terminal. Just so this is the command for it, npm install nestjs/swagger. That's it. Okay, let's install that. Swagger has been installed. And now we need to tell to Nest.js service that, okay, we have this, we want to use Swagger. And the good thing with the Nest.js Swagger module is it will basically parse the whole controller services, those DTOs and all. And based on that, it will generate the documentation automatically. Okay, in order to do that, inject that into the Nest.js application. And we can define that at the entry point, that is main.ts file. So we'll start with the Swagger's document builder, and let's just name it as Swagger config, new document builder. And this is using the builder pattern. So we'll start with set title as maybe nestcc crash course, and set description, and also nestcc description. And also we can define a set version for now as 1.0, and also let's add tag nestcc, let's call build. That's it. So now we have this Swagger configuration built. Let's set up a Swagger module now. Swagger module setup, and this is where the path where this document should be spinned up. Let's add this at the API, and let's pass the Nest application, and we need to pass the document over here. So we can do Swagger module dot create document, and we'll pass the Nest application and also Swagger config. That's it. So this is a one-time thingy. You can just go through the documentation, and uh, you can also tweak so many settings for this Swagger. Okay. And now this Swagger module has been integrated. As the server is already running, let's just go to the browser and let's add /API. As you can see here now, the documentation has been automatically generated. And also for the users module, you can see we have all the different controller endpoints what we defined. API, so get API users, post API users, get API users by ID and all. So we can actually look at the definition, and also we can try it out right away. So if we just call get users execute, we got the responses like this. Okay. And also if you see here, we have this create user DTO, but now somehow it is not able to parse it properly. The reason, if you look at the definition over here at the users controller, we are telling that for the post endpoint, create user DTO. Now let's just open create user DTO. It has name, email, and age, but somehow Swagger is not able to pass this class, right? So it's very easy. We just need to add a decorator for each property, that is API property. That's it. And it's automatically imported, and that is from the NestJS Swagger. Okay. Let's just add for email and age. Okay. Now let's go back to the browser, and if we refresh, create user DTO, name, string, and these star marks, if you can see here, these are like required parameters. So though we defined in the create user DTO, it can't pass this as an option. So we can actually pass this as required false. Okay. Now if we refresh and see, age is an optional field. Okay. So for the create post API users, you can see the schema over here now. So the request body, and this is the sample example value. You can actually create from over here, and let's just use as is execute, and we got the response also. Okay. The Now if you can see here, for the email it is accepting string as is. Later we'll be covering the validation pipes where we can validate these objects as well. And let's move on to the get users also. So here if you see, we have responses, but we don't, by simply looking at the documentation, we really don't know what is the response structure for this get API users. Let's fix that also. Now moving back to the code, users controller, for the find all, we have this users array type. So what you can do is, let's add the API properties for this also. Okay. API properties, let's import that. Let's import that also. Okay, and also in the user controller you can mention as API okay response of type user. Okay, and is array true. That's it. Now let's refresh the Swagger documentation. And for the users, now if you can see response, we have this array of the schema. And schema also you can see over here, this is of user type. And down also if you see, this is the users level. And at the schemas, you can see create user detail that we already defined earlier. And for the user also, it has populated. Now we can all again define this as optional required false. That's it. Age is optional now. Now let's add for the get user by ID also. You can just copy paste this and user is not true. That's it. Let's refresh and verify for the user by ID. We got the schema. Okay. Now let's introduce error handling. Imagine if we don't give the proper valid user ID, right? We should actually throw the error. Now let's check currently what's the behavior. So let's go to the postman and ABC01. We are getting the response now. What if we add another value ABC011? We are getting 200 and the response is empty, which is not correct, right? So what we can do in the user controller, let's just save this as user. Okay, and if user is not defined, we can just simply throw with an SJS inbuilt functions as not found exception. NestJS has so many exception handlers. For now, for this example, if user is not found, we can just throw not found exception, else return user. Okay, now when we call this one, we got this status 404 not found. And if we give the valid user ID, we get the object. That's it. So now let's add some validations. We just need to define some decorators for the same create user DTO and the validations will be applied automatically. In NestJS, we have a concept called pipes. Okay, so pipe is a class annotator with injectable decorator which implements the pipe transform interface. Don't worry much about it. So for the case of crash course, you can assume that. So whenever there is a client request happening for the route specific handler, we can define some pipes. So which can be a validation pipe or a transformation pipe. Okay. And NestJS also has some inbuilt pipes like parse and pipe. Like let's say in our example, we have the ID as a string, right? But let's say for a different application, this ID is a number. So what you can do for the users controller, you can actually define over here parameter ID. You can also validate ID as an integer parseInt. So this parseInt pipe we can use. Okay. So for this example, we'll be using validation pipe to validate the create user DTO. Okay. So in order to do that and also automatically apply at the global level, we'll again need jump back to the main.ts. Okay. So what we'll be doing, we'll be using app.use global pipes. Okay, we'll just pass the one new validation pipe instance. That's it. Okay, and there's an error in the Nest server restart. That is class validator package is missing. So NestJS has a dependency with class transformer and class validator when using pipes. Let's just install both in a different terminal. npm install class validator and class transformer. Okay, both are installed. Now let's go back to the server and server is not throwing any errors. It's all started. Okay, so now the validation pipe has been configured at the global level. Now what we need to do, now let's just go back to the users controller and open create user DTO. So we just configured the validation pipe to apply at the global level, but now for this class we need to define that, okay, this is a string and this is an email, this is an age and all that stuff. So class validator has so many helper functions. You can go through their documentation, but for now just add some decorators to these properties. So for the name, let's is not empty. Okay, so as you can see, it is automatically imported is not empty from class validator. And for the email, let's add is email. Okay, for now these two are enough. Now let's just go back to the postman, and for the post request, if I just pass as Vivek1 and let's call send. As you can see, there is an error with 400 bad request. Email field must be an email, and just rename this name to name1 and email1 and just send. If you can see now in the messages, we have two error messages. Name should not be empty and email field must be an email, right? So let's just revert, fix this one. Name is fixed now and we are passing Vivek one, and email must field must be an email. So let's just address this also, nestcc.com. And if we send, now it is successful. If we remove this at the rate, send, email field must be an email. Okay, so by just adding some decorators, is email, is not empty, and there are so many helper decorators from the class validator where you can use to add more robust validations. I hope till this part it is clear. Now we'll just cover the last chunk of it, that is gods. So in NestJS there is a concept called gods, and if we can look at the definition, so any request coming from the client side, we can guard that request and add some more extra checks, like, and these guards acts as a middleware which protects requests from the client side and will decide whether to process that HTTP request or just throw an error. So in this crash course we'll just add a very basic guard. Let's just go back to the code, and in the other terminal let's generate a guard with the same CLI nest generate guard auth. Okay, now it will create two files, spec file and auth.god.ts file inside auth.god. This god's concept is a bit complex, but for now you can just see at line number 9 we are returning true. Okay, and this is a class auth.god which is implementing can activate. So this is a NestJS concept where any god should be implemented with can activate, and it should return a boolean. Okay, or a promise boolean, where if it is true then it will resume the request, otherwise it will throw an error 403. And as you can see here, we define this authGuard class as an injectable, so we can use this as the controller level or also at the specific method level. So for this crash course, let's not make all the requests as secure. Maybe for only for creating a user, we'll just make this as a secure API, so we can just directly use as use God's decorator, and we'll just pass the one what we created, authGuard. That's it. So for now, the authGuard is returning true. So let's make this as false, and let's just try this post request. So we're getting 403. So by definition, NestJS will return 403 status code for the gods when they return false. Okay. So let's make this API working again in a way the client should send a header with some valid value, then only will process the request. So what value? Let's say x nest cc key, something like this. Okay, and the value should be Vivek for now. So let's just copy this one. So this is the header. We are defining inside the authGuard definition that only when the request is passed with this header and with value as Vivek, then only we'll process the request, otherwise we will throw the error. Okay, so in order to get that thing, if you can see here inside the can activate function, we have this context. So this context is an execution context of the nest.js. So what you can do over here, you can get the request object from this context. So constant request context, switch to HTTP and get request. And from here you can call like cc header request of headers of our key x nest cc key. Okay. As you have noticed, by definition, God will send status code as 403 when you return false, right? Let's make it a bit more ideal. We will throw 401 when we don't receive the header. So when we don't receive this header, x nest cc key, okay? If this is the case, we just throw unauthorized exception. Okay. But if the header is present and if its value is not equals to Vivek, okay, then we'll return false. Else if all the error checks are done, then at the end we can return it as true. Okay. I think in the background the server is already restarted. Now let's remove the header itself. Okay. And we got 401 unauthorized. Okay. Now we'll just send the header with a different value, maybe Vivek 1. Okay. Now we got again the same error as 403 forbidden. Now when we pass the correct value as Vivek for this key x nest cc key, okay, we have this error again. So let's add at the rate. Okay, at the rate. Now let's just send the request. It is valid. Now just take the value again for the header. We get 403, and if we don't even pass the header, we get 401. That's exactly how we defined in our auth code definition. So that's the last chunk in this Nest.js crash course. I hope this is clear. I'll just reiterate the concepts we have covered in this crash course. We started with a simple command nest a new project name that creates a boilerplate code, and from there we have walked through how the app controller is being defined and how this get hello function is being wrapped up, and from there we created the users controller with the dummy responses as return types as strings, and from there we slowly introduced and from there we introduced user service, and we defined an in-memory sort of database array, and from there we covered these three functions, and we linked these functions inside the user's controller, and we injected user service with a DI concept, that is dependency injection, and we have started using user service functions at that respective endpoints. And if you can see, for the other endpoints we are just using the old string based, and again part of the crash course we haven't covered for all the routes. And to support these return types and all, we define DTO, create user DTO, and for the entities, user entity, which will reflect the database mode. And then we introduce Swagger, and this is a very basic setup that's required. And from there, we have given a walkthrough of how the Swagger documentation looks like and how we can map this create user DTO and user objects over here, and how we can map these things again at that specific route definitions. And then we added validations over here, create user DTO with the help of class validator validation pipe. And we define here is not empty, and for the email, we should have this as is email. And then at the last we introduced god auth god, and we defined with a very basic as this header should be there, and if the header is not there we're going to throw 401, and if the header is there but if it is not valid then we are returning this as false. And again in the nest.js for the gods, if it returns false it will send the response as 403. 403. Usually we'll handle this as a 401, but I'm just emphasizing this as by default. God, when we return this as false, NestJS will send 403 response code, not the 401, which is unauthorized. I hope this entire NestJS course is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. If you love this crash course, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, which will motivate me to make more interesting content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.